Hello and welcome to those who are listening. So, as you know, this episode has been moved from previous Thursday as I wasn't feeling well, so we moved it to this week, and this also means that this week we are having two episodes. But that also means that Valentina is not able to join me today. So I would very much appreciate your comments and questions. And this week, well, actually, this topic, as we have two topics this week, we are looking at the concept of well-being and the definition, and looking at what's stopping us from embedding well-being into companies strategically, and why very often we don't get the buy-in for some of the mental health and well-being initiatives and support interventions from the leadership, and what can we do about this. So yeah, what can we look at this today? So I think first of all, let's look at the broader concept of what organizational well-being even is, and then we can look at some common practices of how it is currently being done, and what we are seeing from our research, what supposed to be happening in the industry, and what we believe where the industry is going, where the future is, and what that means for our everyday practices, for our talent, for our well-being, for the way we run our businesses operationally. So yeah, so welcome to those who are joining. Please do let me know if you have any thoughts or questions. So yeah, so what do you even think organizational well-being is? Um, and what I find very interesting, that at the moment there is no one common established definition, and it really varies based on where does well-being sit with where does it sit strategically within different businesses. And we can see that in most companies it sits with HR, as it's part of human resources, part of looking after people in the right way. There are some other companies where it sits with inclusion and diversity. There are some other companies that are also looking at including well-being under their sustainability, and really looking at this kind of broader SDG objectives, and see where can well-being be placed as a strategic tool to build a sustainable business, right? And in a way that sustains their people, sustains company from economic point of view, but also sustains the environment. So yeah, it is interesting to reflect. And I think some of the biggest obstacles of what's stopping well-being to be delivered properly, strategically, yeah, then there are a number of things there. And one is that some of the individuals who are trusted to deliver some of the well-being initiatives, or who are actually responsible for well-being in their businesses, are not health and well-being experts, right? So even when you think from, let's say, HR perspective, some of those professionals, they go we go through our own qualifications, but that does not necessarily include mental health awareness and well-being strategy per se. So it becomes very difficult to then know what is the right thing to do, and how do you then filter the right providers, and how do you choose in the noise of all of this kind of wider wide field of providers, and how do you know what is best. But then the other aspect to that is that some of those best health and well-being professionals who are designing and delivering, let's say, some of those workshops and some of those initiatives, they are not business experts and they are not strategy experts. So you combine the two, and we end up with this industry that is full of fluffy solutions, right? Here is your yoga, here is your meditation class, here is your mindfulness workshop. And we don't necessarily look beyond this kind of skin deep layer of what does it mean to embed well-being strategically in the business, and what does it really mean for us to really embed this in our daily company operations, in our culture, in the way we work, in the way we live, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge, because currently there is no standard that would show that's how good looks like, that's exactly how you establish your starting point, and that's exactly how you measure your progress. And what is very interesting is with some of the clients that I work with, I ask them, how good is your company at providing for employee health and well-being? And we get very mixed responses. But of course, my next question is, how do you know? And that is the challenging part, because if we want to build well-being strategy in a way that makes a difference, we need to know, how do we measure success? And that's probably the starting point. Why are we even doing this? What's the purpose of this strategic well-being that we're trying to implement? And how we are measuring success, what success means to us from the well-being point of view. But what does it mean to individuals? What does it mean to the business? What does it mean to leadership and some of those decision makers? Because the data that then they have should be used to make other strategic decisions in the business, right? So, yeah, so I would love to hear some of your thoughts and questions, and what do you believe is stopping well-being from being implemented strategically, and what it's preventing us from measuring the impact of that. So um, yeah, so how can we get this right? And I think what is very interesting is that I think with like with every initiative, we should start with definitions and really redefining the language, what organizational well-being even means. And it's important to look at what it means to us, to our people, to our business. But it's important to also know the broader definition of strategy and what it really means for us to be living and to be delivering some of those initiatives. And our definition at Elite Mind is that organizational well-being is supposed to be a process through which organization drives human, economic, and environmental sustainability. And if we look at that as a process through which we drive outcomes for our people, for our business, and for the wider society, for the environment, then we can start to look at the well-being in a very different way, right? And now this is not just a fluffy initiative, because we know that this little app will definitely not going to be delivering all of those outcomes and some of those results that we are aiming. So what will? And I think the effectiveness of our interventions and the quality of our support that we put out there really depends on the quality of questions we're asking ourselves, right? What are the questions that we are asking to our employees? What questions we are asking of ourselves? What questions we are asking to our leadership teams, right? And it's those questions that will then determine our direction and purpose of our initiatives. Um, yeah, thank you, Steve, for your comment. Most mistakenly think that well-being does not impact on the bottom line. And absolutely, I think, again, from the business perspective, you still want to make sure that it drives the economic outputs of your business. You still have to survive. And if we have some of those interventions that it feels, well, interventions maybe is the wrong word. I would like to see all of the well-being initiatives being used as interventions to drive some sort of impact. But in reality, a lot of those initiatives are really not demonstrating some of that impact, right? So some of them are, some of them aren't. But again, what does that impact means, and how can we measure that success, not necessarily in the economic um, areas through our bottom line of the business, but what does it mean for health of our culture, for example? What does it mean for our happiness of our employees? What does it mean for the quality of our leadership and the capacity that we build to provide for the future? And I think with well-being, there is this tricky aspect that we have to learn how to embed it in processes of today and operationally, right? It has to improve the business. And if we are looking at our communication, if we're looking at our support infrastructure, if we are looking at our leadership, if we are looking at our, again, you're looking at your retention and sicknesses and absences, it's okay to look at some of those, but that's the result of our work, right? This is not the reason why we're trying to do the well-being, right? And when we look at this kind of daily operations now, what we also need to balance that with is this future goal and outcome, to understand where is our business going right now? Where is it going to be in 5, 10 years time? Is it even going to survive in 5, 10 years time? And what capacity we need to build within our business to be able to get there? And the challenge within that sometimes we don't even know what specific skills, what specific abilities, what are some of those capacities that will be needed in 10 years time. So the only thing that we can then build from that perspective is people's ability to respond to change, to still deliver operational excellence under uncertainty and all of this kind of unknown environments and fast changing economic environments in which we operate, right? And that's where well-being can add a lot of value, because then you are future-proofing your business. You are improving your operations here and now. You can improve your culture. You can improve your engagement. You can improve your retention. You can attract better talent. But also it's about thinking ahead and looking at how can we invest in the business in the future. And I think that future bit is very often missing, right? If we are asking for well-being support because we have too high turnover and people on long-term sicknesses, it's already too late, right? Like that's already a symptom of unhealthy processes, of unhealthy working environments. So Sandra, thank you. Saying questions are essential. I find that not enough questions are being asked, and not regularly enough, and not the right questions are being asked of people. So leaders end up with choosing the fluffy well-being solutions that doesn't drive the outcome they desire. Absolutely, Sandra. I think with everything as well that we do, we always start with that basic question of what are your needs within the business, and how do you find what are the needs of the people, what are the needs of different individuals and different layers, and how do you then go and build a strategy in a way that then meets those needs, right? Because if we are not asking the right people and the right questions, then we are just and ending up guessing and putting things out there, and just kind of throwing things against the wall, and seeing what sticks, right? But if we take time to really do proper audits and proper diagnostics, and to really try to understand what are those unmet needs, what are those struggles, what are some of the capacities that we need to build, then we have very, very different basis on which we can build our well-being strategy. And that definitely the starting point. The problem, it's definitely in reference to what you're saying there, Sandra, is that most companies are not even prepared to ask. And they don't ask because they are not prepared to deal with the answers. And this is, again, sometimes we choose to lead through ignorance because that's our safety zone, right? We know what we know. We choose to operate this way, and ignorance can be a bliss, right? And unfortunately, a lot of leaders operate in that environment. And when we do audits and diagnostics in organizations, we see huge gap. I can ask CEO about, what do you think about your talent development? What do you think about the support infrastructure? What exactly you're doing to support your people? How exactly does it look like? What's the vision of the company, and what are you trying to achieve strategically? And I can ask, a cleaner the same questions. And in ideal world, those two views of the world supposed to match because they are employees of the same company, right? But the answers are like day and night. So some of the biggest value that we can add through some of those well-being support interventions, it's not even the intervention itself, is the preparation of it, the whole kind of plowing the ground and really preparing everything before we plant the seeds, right? And the communication and alignment, organizational alignment across different departments, alignment across, vertically and horizontally, to make sure that we work towards the same goals. We have the shared vision, we have the shared common purpose, and we all know what is the purpose of this organization and what is my role and my place in that. There is a huge sense of well-being that can be derived from that meaning and purpose in that company, right? And a lot of that is often taken for granted. So absolutely. So Steve, a lot of what is going on is window dressing. So Sandra is asking, what type of diagnostics and audits have you seen successfully extract the real needs people have? Yeah, well, this is tricky because I think a lot of companies are doing your kind of standard employee engagement assessments. And we actually design custom assessments for every company that we work with, because I don't believe that any standard psychometric or a test or a survey can really address all of the needs of the business. So I think it's a combination of, well, I can share how we are doing it, and maybe there are some best practices to learn from that. That first we look at individuals and what are their needs, and here it's having interviews with people and really hearing their stories, but also immersing in their environment and observing how they behave, observing how they communicate, observing the physical space and the physical environment, to see what kind of climate are we creating here in this work. And from some of those observations and from those interviews, we then also wanna look at how organization is providing for some of the employee needs in through talent and development. So everything from hiring to firing, and all of the development stages in between. We're looking at support infrastructure. So when something is happening to that individual and maybe in their personal life, how good is our company's support infrastructure to support them internally, but also when it goes beyond our area of support, and therefore we need to direct to experts what is happening there. we're looking at communication flows, right? So again, alignment between the top and lower levels of organization, alignment between different departments, alignment between different leadership roles, and do they share, the same vision, and do they work towards the same destination? And then finally, governance and compliance, right? So is everything that we do is representative of our documentation, and is everything really are our processes in a way structured and communicated and represented in a way that allows people to find them? So it's a combination of those elements. And I think when we are looking through some of those assessments, so we have, combination of some interviews, surveys, you're really looking at this kind of ecosystemic dynamic between individual and the organization, right? So you look first at each individual that you are speaking with, and you're saying, who are you as a person? Even CEO, HR person, you can have very different conversations with them. You can say, I can talk about you as an HR person, I can talk to you as a CEO and your business challenges that you are facing. I can talk to you as a human being and look at what your current personal challenges, how your life looks like, how your work looks like, what are you struggling with, what you are enjoying, what you love and what you hate, and what you hope, what your hopes and fears and dreams are, right? So I think it's very, very important to capture both of that, and really look at, okay, so there is this individual, and with all of their well-being, their needs, with all of their diversity, neurodiversity, with all of their challenges of their work. And then you have environment in which that person operates, right? You have policies, processes, procedures, culture, reporting lines. And what we're really trying to understand is these relational ecosystemic dynamics between the two. So when the person comes in to work and brings their own personal struggles, how does that affect the environment? And when something changes in work, when you change some of your reporting lines, when you improve some of your supporting ecosystem, when you train and develop specific things in people, how exactly does that affect each and every individual? And I think this is what's missing, right? This looking at the broader picture and really looking at humans in their environment. Let me see some of the questions here. So thank you, Faye, saying true self-care and well-being. And that saves people from severe burnout. And burnout costs companies a small fortune. It's not rocket science. We are not machines, yet many companies expect people to behave like they are. And absolutely, even the term human resources, what does that mean? Right? We only use them as means to as a resource to achieve business means. Thank you, Sandra. I'm glad that some of our approach resonates with you. Turn the clock back to the turn of the century, where we are now mentally, is equivalent to the sweatshops of old. And Joyce is commenting, saying, Evelina, imagine your wonderful practice inside of an organization blended with a real-time and ongoing self-reporting on stress, mood, and well-being categories, levels, and so much more day-to-day data. Absolutely. I think in terms of the ongoing monitoring, that is crucial, right? Because if we say that, let's say everything that we do, my work, my purpose of our company existing is making sure that companies can meet their employee needs through well-being strategy. And there are all of these different components that needs to happen for this to happen, right? So, and first of all, it's knowing what those needs are, and they will always be changing, right? So challenges, again, environment, everything that is happening around us, it's not constant. We are always in that constant flux, and therefore what I need today and what will I need tomorrow and what will I need next week will vary. So the big problem as well with a lot of those well-being solutions, that everything that we put out there, we already putting something for problems of yesterday, right? And we are not being proactive enough to look at capturing the data of how people are feeling now, but also looking at how do we balance that with a capacity building for future needs, for future development of the business? And that constant monitoring has to happen. So we have to have established feedback mechanisms when we say, okay, our starting point is supposed to be finding unmet employee needs and finding what it is that really what each human being needs in this environment, and then looking at what are we currently doing that works and how exactly we are currently meeting some of those needs. How can we do more of what we are good at, and how can we correct some of those processes that maybe are not fit for purpose anymore. And as we do that, we then come up with those solutions and interventions. And as we go and deliver them, as we embed them in our practices, in our culture, and our ways of working, we need to have a mechanism to then collect the feedback and embed it back to assess how well is this affecting individuals. What is the impact of those interventions on the company? So I know Steve mentioned before, the impact on bottom line. Absolutely, we have to have this, because at the end of the day, that business has to survive as well, right? If that business is not surviving, then we cannot provide for people's needs as well. I think there is sometimes this dilemma. It's like, forget the profit, let's focus on people, and then we get lost in this kind of fluffy mindfulness class, or we then focusing on profit, productivity, and performance, and we forget that we are achieving this at the cost of people. And I think Faye mentioned burnout, right? And that we are really achieving those economic outputs at the cost of individuals. So there needs to be that balance, and there needs to be these feedback loops between the individual and the environment. And that's where our well-being strategy needs to sit. And of course, we keep saying, yeah, mindfulness or yoga or meditation is fluffy. But you know what? I know a lot of people who are listening to this. There's a lot of value in this, right? There's a lot of value in all of those practices, but that is not your well-being strategy, right? And I think also here is the difference between wellness and well-being, right? Because well-being, it's how happy I am with myself, with my life, with my work in my current given environment, and do I have access to support and access to resources. So it includes wider economic perspective and access to resources, while wellness is really it's really a process of self-care, right? So how well am I maintaining my state, my emotional state? How well am I maintaining my stress levels? How well I'm maintaining my practices of rest and rejuvenate and recuperate to make sure that I don't end up burning out? But of course, those are different things and they have a different place. But if we mix them, and if we cannot tell the difference between when we need which one, then we end up trying to fix toxic working environment with your mindfulness app, right? And your bean bag will not save someone from harassment and abuse at work, right? And your yoga class will not get someone out of the abusive relationship that someone is experiencing in their private life, or again, you're looking at all of the other life challenges that people are going through, right? Gender change, fertility struggles, your loved ones die, you go through cancer treatments, there's so much that is happening that is still not being addressed well in that business context, in that business environment. Yeah, and Steve, thank you for sharing. Burnout is real. Trust me, been there, and absolutely. And again, I wouldn't have been doing what I'm doing today if I haven't had experience that myself. And it's easy to be done, and with things like burnout, it's also we become blind to our own needs when we are placed in that kind of high performance, high pressure environment, and we believe that we can and everything is possible. We neglect some of our own needs. We stop listening. We don't know how to say no. We don't know how to pause. We don't know how to um, reverse some of these kind of like toxic habits and behaviors and ways of coping into true ways of self-care and really some of these wellness practices. And definitely where is the responsibility, right? How much of the burnout is responsibility of the individual and how much of the responsibility is it lies with an employer? That's interesting to explore. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, Steve, Joyce, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that. And I think for me, it's not when we look at something like burnout and from my behavioral neuroscience point of view, I've spent over a decade researching resilience, right? And I worked in that high corporate environment when you see high achievers, you see those high performers, and the more you give them, it seems like the stronger they get, and the farther they go. And then I also worked at the same time at the charity called Maytree that works with suicidal people. And here you have completely different end of the extreme where people are struggling to get out of bed in the morning, people are struggling to brush their teeth, and people are struggling to cope with small life's challenges, and they don't want to live, they end up stressed, depressed, not wanting to live. And what's the difference, right? What's the difference? That you place two people in exactly the same environment. One of them will say, hey, I'm going to grow and learn with this, and another one will end up stressed, depressed, not wanting to live. So I spend a lot of time really researching that resilience and what shapes our ability to respond to the challenges and to operate in this uncertain environments. And for many years, with all of the research, and this is kind of a common lie that I think we all live with, that it's about mindset, right? And it's about your belief system, and whether you believe you can or believe you cannot, you are right. And there is all of this kind of messages of just be positive, and we sharing those stories of kind of lived stories of people who kind of gone through that and came to the other side stronger, and saying like, if you can do it, if I can do it, you can do it too. And we really building this kind of mindset of a belief of like you can do it, and really push through your boundaries. But some of that positive mindset can be your biggest enemy, and that's exactly what it was for me, because I never said no. Whatever target you give me, I always exceeded. I took on so many different things at the same time. I worked 80-hour weeks while still studying at university, while raising a small child, and volunteering at nights to support suicidal people. It's a lot, right? It's a lot to take on, but the mindset that we have and the goals that we set can really narrow our point of view, right? And once we set the goal that there's this career objective that I want to achieve, there's some success that I want to achieve in my life, like I try to prove something to myself in that perspective, right? And in that moment I was blind to my own needs. And I think that's where the responsibility of employer comes in, because in that moment, when you're creating that environment where person is really motivated, is really driven, and really knows what they're delivering here, and they are willing to give a piece of themselves for this workplace, it is a responsibility of the employer to recognize where too much is too much. And sometimes even noticing signs of burnout, it's very difficult to notice it by ourselves, because when you are in that state, kind of close to that boundary, we are blind to that. We become irritated, we become stressed, we know that something is not right, but we still push through. And we need to be better at giving training for everyone to to recognize those needs in others and provide that support. So I think it's definitely if a fair balance that needs to happen in that. So yeah, and again, when we think about things like stress and burnout, it's part of company's culture, right? So how, is it okay to answer emails at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Is it okay to reply to your calls while you are on holidays? Is it okay to be working, 17-hour days? What is okay and what is not okay? It's very interesting. And I think that's where some of those, going back to comments that Sandra was making before, about some of those, assessments and diagnostics and how do we check some of those needs. We need to incorporate those aspects in our assessments, right? Looking at how can we assess companies' culture, assessing companies' health at that operational level, looking at all of these different aspects that are invisible, because at the end of the day, the best well-being initiatives are invisible, right? It's those that become part of our daily way of work, part of our daily lives, part of our daily operational systems, and also part of the training and development, right? So it's really, really crucial to look at all of these different aspects and really consider individual in their environment. And yeah, for me, I think from neuroscience point of view, I spend so much time researching kind of here is a human nervous system, there is this human with its own ecosystem inside, and then you place that individual in that environment. Imagine if we could use that working environment as an intervention to drive health and well-being outcomes. And that's my goal, right? If every organization knows how to do this, if we know how to design those healthy working environments in a way that then drives results for individuals, that it translates into economic outputs, and that also allows us to create a bigger purpose for our organization. And I think it's really crucial, when we look at companies like, Patagonia, Unilever, and really the way they are positioning themselves, that they have a role to play in the society, in this universe, in this kind of economic climate, right? And and it's a very different way of working. It's very different way of operating behind the closed doors, where everybody understands the vision and purpose of that organization. And and we really need to take well-being there, right? I think well-being strategy needs to start with that. What's the purpose of our organization? What's your personal purpose? And why have you joined this organization, right? And we need to stop assuming that people just join companies by accident. No, they choose the company, and we need to stop assuming that now once they are in, they'll stay there forever. Again, we have to do the work to provide for that person's needs, and look at what is it specifically that this person is contributing to us, and what is it exactly that we are contributing back to that individual, and how this company contributes back to the wider society and the economy. So Joyce is saying that all habits and behaviors out of balance, whether they appear positive or appear detrimental, are counterproductive and over time take their toll on our mental, physical, and emotional health. No one is immune to their casualties. Yeah, I think when we talk about habits and behaviors, I think this is really, really crucial, because the way we live and the way we work in this modern environment is so far away from how we have evolved as human beings to thrive and survive. And this conflict creates a lot of mental health issues, because we are not in sync with our own bodies. We are not in sync with our environments. We are not in sync with nature. We are not in sync with other human beings. And there is a lot of these connections that are being completely distorted. And again, if we are then building, if some of those habits and routines that are automatically driving our behavior are influenced by these unhealthy environments, then those habits become unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? We start creating all of those addictive behaviors, whether that's, addiction to work, whether that's addiction to alcohol, addiction to drugs, addiction to gambling, you name it, eating disorders, identity disorders, all of those things are actually symptoms of unmet people's needs, right? And therefore, I believe that if we really strip everything back to the essence of what it means to be human, and we look at, while we understand that, what this means for our environment, for our company, and how can we really make our workplaces more human? How can we provide for those human needs? Then the impact of these humans on the economic outputs and on the bottom line will be completely different, right? So I think it's about this balance. And we we say that, we are this kind of, rational, intelligent human beings. We are able to achieve what we want at will, but it's not true. It's not true. Actually, only our small portion of choices and decisions are really governed by logic and reason. Most of the time, we are just, emotional habit creatures of habit, and a lot of those daily actions and behaviors are shaped subconsciously, and it's shaped through millions of years of evolution. It's shaped through our upbringing. It's shaped through our genes and all of the epigenetic expressions. And therefore, there is so much there that we are not even in control of. And yet, there is this powerful force that we can tap into. And if we can really align, with and work in line with how our minds and bodies are supposed to be working, how it's supposed to be operating, we can then drive different levels of productivity and efficiency, right? These traditional, let's say, 8-hour days. This is, this is from manufacturing, that you come into a factory and, you work specific hour shift and kind of, produce things. But we are completely taking this out of proportion, and we are expecting everyone to kind of plow for 8-9 hour shifts constantly to be productive, where actually our bodies haven't been built this way. Our mind, our brain goes through these ultradian rhythms of kind of highs and lows throughout the day in these kind of 90-minute cycles, where we have a peak of focus and we have to release that in a way, and allow ourselves to relax and integrate the knowledge and the processes of new learning, in order to then apply into the next bit of kind of performance and productivity. So if we can create those more natural environments that are in sync with human beings, that's also a huge part of that, and supposed to be part of some of those assessments, how human our environments. And yeah, so definitely, I think, in to summarize, I think, let's start with why. Let's start with a bigger purpose of why we've been doing this. What's the purpose of this well-being strategy that we are building? And then look at what success means to us, to our people, and to our business. And therefore, what needs to happen for that process to be built in a way that will translate in those human outputs, in those economic outputs, in those environmental outputs, in whatever way we choose to measure that success. And when we do that, then we need to find a way to constantly measure our to kind of create this feedback loop, so that we can constantly measure the impact of our actions and of our interventions, so we can then go back and constantly self correct and create this kind of like living organism, when we constantly looking at those three things, right? How well are we meeting our employee needs? Is that support So first, like, what are our employee needs, how well we are meeting them at the business level, and then as we design some of those interventions, we're looking at the impact of those, and we measure the impact of that on individual and organizational level. So I hope this was helpful. And I think definitely there is so much more that needs to happen with the industry and where it's going. We are really privileged to be able to have funding to design national guidelines for well-being strategy, and this is the process that we are working through, really establishing some of the framework that would show companies how exactly they can do this, how to find your unmet employee needs, how to embed that in a strategy, and how to measure the impact. So we still have a few places for organizations who could take part in this research. And what that means, that we can do all of the diagnostics and the co-design of the strategy at no cost, because that's a fully funded research initiative. Therefore, the only cost for the business would be delivery of those services that are now specifically tailored and designed to fit the needs of their people and of the business. So it's a wonderful initiative, and I'm really privileged to be able to lead this project. So if you would like to have any questions, if you have any companies who you feel would benefit from this consulting package, really, where we can kind of help you to unpack your company and how people really feel and their needs, and unpack what is happening right now in your company and what can be improved, then please do reach out to us and we can have a discussion and see if this project can contribute to you as well. So thank you very much. I know it is Mental Health Awareness Week, and there will be a lot of conversations and discussions about mental health in general and about anxiety, which is a focus of this week's topic. And we will be talking about the myths of anxiety on Thursday. So please tune in then, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you soon. You take care. Have a good week. Thank you, everyone. Bye then.